The Houston Texans has been one of the biggest winners, if not the biggest winners of this offseason by trading for a top 10 wideout in Stefon Diggs, and the hell of a job Nick Caserio is doing as GM. He is cementing himself as one of the 5 best general managers in football, and it's been 3 years in his job, and so far he has been killing it. With the new additions of Joe Mixon, Danielle Hunter, and now Stefon Diggs, the Texans within 2 years went from arguably the worst team in football to a legit Super Bowl contender in the AFC South. So in this video, I'm finna discuss why the Houston Texans are having one of the greatest rebuilds in NFL history. But first, A-Man say man, this is the A-Man Show, back at it again for more banker content. Make sure y'all subscribe. I post NBA and NFL content. Turn on post notifications so that way you don't miss anything new from me. Anyways, stay tuned and let's get it started. So back in the 21 offseason, the Texans were in need of a new GM, someone that can clean up the mess that Bill O'Brien has caused when he was the GM/head coach for this team. The Texans were coming off from a horrid season of 4-12, despite Deshaun Watson putting up his best season of his career. And with all the picks they traded to get a Laremy Tunsil, they only had 2 third-round picks of the 2021 draft. In January of that year, the Texans decided to hire Nick Caserio after being the director of player personnel with the Patriots, and with only having low long-round picks, let alone cleaning up the mess that O'Brien made, Caserio was up for the challenge. In the 21 draft, the Texans drafted Davis Mills, a backup QB, in the 3rd round, along with Nico Collins, who will go on and become an 1,000-yard receiver in the next couple of years and be the staple franchise wideout. And later in the round, we'll select Brevin Jordan, who will be another solid wideout for the Texans to use on offense. In the same offseason, Caserio hired David Culley to be the next head coach for this team, but he will only last about a year due to the lack of talent he had to work with on the roster. And by the way, the Texans went 4-13 in 21. The following offseason, the Texans decided to promote Lovie Smith as head coach, which will later be a bigger mistake than hiring David Culley. But the best thing about the 22 offseason is the draft. In the 22 draft, they drafted Derek Stingley Jr. with the 3rd overall pick, who is now a top corner in the league. In the later rounds, drafted Jalen Petrie, who is a top 15 safety in the league, along with Christian Harris, Damian Pierce, and John Mechie. Although the Texans had another horrid year in 22, they will at least secure themselves with the 2nd overall pick. Despite that, many people started to criticize the front office for not having a clear direction of this team without acknowledging the benefit of the doubt. And it's how Caserio drafted all of these pieces, mostly on the offensive side of the ball, so that their coming franchise QB will have something to work with. Going into the 23 offseason, that's when Caserio will start cooking. His first move was hiring former Texans player/D coordinator for the 49ers in DeMeco Ryans as head coach. In his last year at San Fran, had the best defense in the NFL, and being the head coach for this team was textbook. They also hired Bobby Slovic, who worked with the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan as the passing game coordinator. And in the infamous draft, they will select CJ Stroud with the 2nd overall pick, and then traded up with the Cardinals to draft Will Anderson with the 3rd overall pick. They also drafted Drew Scruggs, Tank Dell, and Harry To'oTo'o. In free agency, they signed Jimmy Ward, Dalton Schultz, Devin Singletary, Denzel Perryman, Robert Woods. Not only the Texans hired well, but drafted well, and also added pieces in free agency. And because of all of these moves, they are due for a breakout season, and they did such that. The Texans improved from one of the worst defenses in the league to a top 12 defense. Will Anderson will win Defensive Rookie of the Year. CJ Stroud will have a sensational all-time great rookie season, and him too will win Offensive Rookie of the Year as well. And at a certain point was among the top 5 in the MVP race. Nico Collins will break out as well. Tank Dell was having a great rookie season before he went down to injury. The Texans improved their record from 3-13 the year prior to 10-7 the following year, and even winning a playoff game by a wide margin. Now, of course, they will lose to the Ravens in the divisional round, but the Texans have overachieved so much so that they became one of the brightest teams in football. But this offseason, it has been honestly incredible of what Nick Caserio has done to this roster. First and foremost, they re-signed Dalton Schultz to a 3-year, $36 million deal. They also signed Danielle Hunter in a 2-year, $49 million deal. They also signed Denico Autry to bolster the depth on the D-line. They traded for Joe Mixon with just a 7th-round pick and extended him for 3 years, $27 million. Signed Azeez Al-Shaair, who was a part of DeMeco Ryans' defense back in the 22 season. And then last but not least, they traded for Stefon Diggs with a 2nd-round pick of next year's draft, along with a 6th and a 7th rounder. Wow. I have no words. Now, the Texans have Diggs, Collins, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz in the backfield, and they can make a name for themselves as the best receiving core in the league. And also, Joe Mixon can be a receiving threat as well. That, along with a really solid offensive line led by Laremy Tunsil, who is the best left tackle in football, that along with a more improved defense with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson rushing the passer, a deep linebacker core led by Christian Harris, who by the way will be a Pro Bowler this upcoming season, and a secondary of Jalen Petrie, Jimmy Ward, and of course, Derek Stingley. And they're also in the moves of getting Xavier Howard, who is not the same, but he can be a solid starting corner for this team. For Derek Stingley in particular, I expect him to contend with Sauce Gardner regarding the best corner in the league, and I am actually surprised that this dude didn't make a Pro Bowl last year. But anyways, I see Derek Stingley become an all-pro corner for this stout defense. Now, not to mention the defensive genius in DeMeco Ryans too. And as for CJ Stroud, he not only has the opportunity to potentially be the MVP of this league by the end of the 24 regular season with a wideout core he has now, and given how he impacted this offense alone last year, imagine having a top 10 wideout in Stefon Diggs, while Josh Allen posted his best statistical seasons of his career. As we look at this Texan squad, how do they fare against all the teams in their conference? Well, I can tell you now that the Texans are better than the Bills, better than the Dolphins, better than the Bengals, Browns, Steelers. The only teams that the Texans have true contention are the Ravens and the Chiefs. Now, the Ravens don't have Mike McDonald as their D coordinator, and losing Patrick Queen was huge, but they did add Derrick Henry to the offense. They still have Lamar Jackson, but seeing how he disappointed in the playoffs, I don't really trust the Ravens to make a run to a Super Bowl. But the Ravens did beat the Texans in the divisional round last year and also in the regular season too. But this Texans team now is much better on both sides of the ball. So this time, the Texans may get the Ravens number once they match up again. And then we go to the Chiefs. They are the only team that I really don't see the Texans overcoming, even though the Texans have more talent on the roster than the Chiefs. But you can't count out Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and also Travis Kelce, especially them, despite having a lack of talent. They always find a way to win, so I don't see the Texans overcoming them, even if the Texans have a better record than the Chiefs. Hey, maybe they can, I don't know. Maybe CJ Stroud will be among one of the QBs that can actually beat Mahomes in the postseason. I don't know, but I do know that the Texans are now a Super Bowl contender. And I think plenty of people that watches my video will say the same thing. The Texans went from being the worst team in the league to a Super Bowl contender in a matter of 3 years. Just 3 years. Comparing to what the Lions has done in their rebuild, and even them in their second year went 9-8. In the following year, made it to 12-5 with pretty much the same roster as the previous year. Just imagine with the added pieces that the Texans have, they are poised to have a franchise-changing season. I mean, go on and have the best record in the NFL as well as the best record in franchise history, which will cement the statement that the Houston Texans had one of the greatest rebuilds ever. For this franchise to have this bright of a future, it never happened like this in the history of this franchise. Yes, back then the Texans had great teams in the past, but none of them were viewed as a Super Bowl contender. this roster actually is, which means it comes with big expectations and pressure, especially on CJ Stroud to build from that legendary rookie season. But anyways, guys, the Texans, in my opinion, are the biggest winners of this offseason. You can't convince me that this isn't one of the greatest rebuilds the league has ever seen, and they will submit that going into the 24th season. Thank y'all for watching this video. What do y'all think about the Stefon Diggs trade? Let me know in the comment section below, and make sure y'all subscribe for more NBA and NFL content. Road to 1K subs, turn on post notifications, and that is all. Stay litty. This is the A-Man Show. Sign out.